Hello, very beautiful community. We're going to talk, hopefully for no more than 10 minutes, about Bob Woodward in his latest book, War, alleging that Trump had several and up to 7 conversations with Putin since leaving office, and that in 2020 Trump sent COVID tests to Putin. We won't talk about all the other things that have made the news from the upcoming book, like Biden criticizing Obama for never taking Putin seriously enough in 2014, Biden's team being worried that there was an up to 50% chance of Putin using tactical nuclear weapons earlier in the war, Biden eviscerating the Israeli authoritarian populist Netanyahu while not being able to do much about him in practice. What we will focus on instead is that Woodward claims that there have been maybe as many as 7 calls between Trump and Putin after Trump's left the White House. So let's look at this and then we'll ground ourselves a bit. In 2020, Woodward writes, CNN says, I'm taking this from CNN, but this is really all over the media. You can take it from wherever you like. Woodward writes, and I'm going to say Woodward claims and alleges, that Trump had, quote, secretly sent Putin, 2020, a bunch of Abbott point-of-care COVID test machines for Putin's personal use. CNN goes on. During the height of the pandemic, Russia and the US did exchange medical equipment, such as ventilators. But Putin, who infamously isolated himself over fears of COVID. One of the questions I'm often asked as somebody who knows about long COVID is, did Putin do this because unlike people in the West, he actually knows what's up with long COVID? And my answer is no, I don't think he has a clue. He just was scared of a bad acute case of COVID because he felt that losing power for Putin would be a threat to his life. And he has these Wagnerian fantasies about the state of Russia that I briefly touched on in my main channel conversation with Mark Galeotti that is really failing in the algorithm, in part because of my sickness and being away from the main channel for a while, in part possibly because of the invalid traffic bug that unfortunately impacted my main channel. This is something the creator can't do anything about. Now, back to this. Putin famously isolated himself and told Trump on a phone call to keep the delivery of the Abbott machines quiet, Woodward reports. Woodward claims and alleges. Please don't tell anybody you sent these to me, Putin said to Trump, according to Woodward. I don't care, Trump said, fine. Putin said, no, I don't want you to tell anybody because people would get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me. Well, Putin is lying because it would be a problem in Russia if it were public that he is receiving this from the United States. Because Putin, of course, had a catastrophic public health experience with the most grotesque mismanagement, worse than in the West. And this wouldn't be good news for him. Woodward writes that Trump has stayed in touch with Putin after leaving office. In one scene, Woodward recounts a moment in Mar-a-Lago where Trump tells a senior aide to leave the room so he can have what he said was a private phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump's team deny this, and I'm not going to say that this is true, but I'll talk to you as though it is. I'm going to fail for the 10-minute test. I'm going to talk to you as though it is true or as though something like it is true. And in a grounding way rather than in an analytical way. Because if you look at, for instance, when the main channel was in a better place, we're talking about a lot of Americans watching us. And that matters because I care about what country you come from, because I'm trying to offer something of civic use to you. And what you offer is a little bit relative to context. So that matters. And a quarter to a third of our audience is American. And that means, been over 50,000 regular viewers of the main channel from the US, and that matters. So what do I say about this to you at a kind of kitchen conversation level? I think the first thing I say is, oh my word, it's so shocking how unpatriotic these post-truth populists are. And it's significant that these post-truth populists, who often are ex-conservatives, they're conservatives in the sense of being in conservative clothes, but they're anti-conservatives in the sense that they are revolutionaries who want to destroy democratic institutions. But it's striking how entrepreneurial and narcissistically self-serving they are in our age. They are just riding the moments in politics for self-advancement in an entrepreneurial way. And as a result, their talk about loving their country is bullshit. It's about them. Now, you might think that's bad, but it'll get worse in the 2030s, according to my instincts about political tendencies. And tendencies are very important, please. Tendencies are a very important word in politics. I'm not one to have invented it as a useful term, but I find it a very useful term in politics. A tendency is something that may stretch for sort of 7 or 27 years, and it'll mean certain things are more likely, certain things are more difficult. But in the 2030s, I think we will tend toward less buffoonish and more doggedly ideological authoritarian populists. They will be less entrepreneurial and more ideas driven. Today, they're more entrepreneurial and more buffoonish and more erratic. And it's striking how unpatriotic they are. And so what can we do? We can hit them on their lack of patriotism, and we can hit them from the center right, from the center left, from the stronger right and the stronger left too. But if we hit them like that, won't we need to hit them back in a populist way too? Because won't it be ineffective if we use the more procedural language of the 1990s? And the answer here is yes, you can hit them back in a populist way, and that's the most effective way in which to hit them. But notice, populism isn't the problem, even though most populists today in Western countries are irresponsible, anti-democratic populists. Populism is, in the first instance, just a matter of discourse, moving from the procedural and the general ways modern states justify themselves to themselves to kitchen table conversation. Now, can you be completely benign toward institutions if you discourse in a populist way? No. The very act of talking about most politics in the kitchen table way does degrade institutions. But in an age of populism, you can use populism for pro-institutional purposes too. And pro-institutional populist discourse, if it's good, while harming institutions, strengthens them more than it harms them. But it's a difficult type of discourse to pull through the needle. And it's a rare kind of politician who is the pro-institutional populist. But it's possible to hit these guys in populist everyday discourse for their lack of patriotism. You are not putting your country first and you're a disgrace. What was striking on the island that I am on, in the UK, is how little such discourse was used, and it could have been very effective in the Brexit campaign. Now, I am not one of those fundamentalist Remainers who refuses to acknowledge that they lost. I lost. And I lost in a legitimate way, and I accept my defeat. But one of the consequences of Brexit, for instance, has been that immigration from Europe has been replaced by even more immigration from outside of Europe. Imagine what a strong talking point, including a strong right-wing talking point, you can draw out in this way. You guys are talking about taking immigration seriously. You are so irresponsible that you're making the very problem that you supposedly care about worse because you're unserious. And you are the people who disrespect your own voters more than anybody else. The same with Trump. Nobody disrespects Trump's voters more than Trump. So there is room for that patriotic and populist critique of these unpatriotic populists. Now, another question that comes up, perhaps the main one for you, is doesn't this make Trump an enemy? If something like this is true, and even if it isn't, there's enough other stuff in his discourse that can make you feel, isn't he an enemy, if not even a foreign asset of some kind? And you know what I'm going to tell you about this. You can't become a 12-year-old, I'm going to be mean here deliberately, and think that just because your understanding of the issues is more truthful than the understanding of the issues Trump supporters have, that you can buy out of the responsibility for the dangerous dynamics of us treating each other as enemies. If Trump and Trump supporters treat you as an enemy and you treat them as an enemy back, that's going to make them treat you more as an enemy and make you treat them more as an enemy, and on and on and on and on. And it's going to deepen the degree to which you actually are enemies. So when your political opponents are treating you as enemies, it's right to try to keep going as long as possible, treating them as opponents and not enemies. That's one of the things the Harris campaign has understood. And it's changed American politics in the short term from a scenario where Biden had no chance to beat Trump to a situation where, even though I still give concerned warnings about what the outcome of the election might be, the race is now much closer to 50-50. And that's because they understood that you've got to move from number one issue being threat to democracy to number one issue being something else like attack on freedoms or being weird. But it's difficult because instinctively you feel, oh my God, these guys are betraying us. But in a very vulnerable democratic age, the most effective citizens and the most constructive citizens will be the citizens who understand that this is a long game, that you can't have little hissy fit tantrums along the way, that Trump is not an aberration, that more bad stuff and more competent bad stuff than Trump's going to come. So you've got to be disciplined, you've got to be here for the long haul, and you've got to understand the seriousness of the problem while also trusting your institutions enough to know that they won't just collapse just because they are attacked and challenged. So that's a difficult message, especially when algorithms just reward you massively for calling these people foreign agents and refusing to share a table of politics with them. Final remark that might surprise you. We will get under 15 minutes, I think. What do you do first as a citizen? Do you reflect on what we may have done to bring populism about of a destructive kind? You know, what is it that Hillary Clinton's politics did to bring about Trump's politics? Do we reflect on that? Or do we try to beat these guys first and reflect on that second? And the political order here is very important. That might surprise you. The political order is defeat the guys first, understand them second. It's both, but the priority is that, because you can actually become a little bit sort of self-emaciating politically if you just go around saying, yes, I understand this whole crisis of trust because we've done so many bad things to bring it about. Well, you can have helpful observations of that kind, but it won't help you in the instance that matters to defeat these people. Lots of love.